They sent an ultimatum. We sent a mirror. Admiral Eris Thorne stood on the command deck of the UNS Vanguard, the star-dusted blackness of the Cygnus Gap reflected in his polished boots. Before him, the main holotank shimmered, displaying the blockading fleet of the Valbaran hegemony, a rigid, unyielding formation of gunmetal gray warships. They were a wall of threats, their ultimatum a poison dart aimed at the heart of the civilian convoy huddled behind Thorne's fleet. The timer, a stark crimson glyph projected in the upper corner of the tank, pulsed with malevolent patience 040000. 4 hours until they would open fire on the unarmed transports. His voice was a low, steady rumble that cut through the bridge's controlled quiet. Status Lyra. Hegemony fleet remains static. Admiral, the fleet mind's voice resonated calm and crystalline from the air itself. They broadcast the ultimatum on all standard channels looped. No deviation. Their doctrine is absolute. They do not negotiate after an ultimatum is issued. The console before Thorne's XO commander Eva Rostova cast a cool blue light on her focused expression as she monitored the energy readings. A faint scent of ozone hung in the recycled air, a byproduct of the ship's heightened readiness. They believe strength is the only argument worth hearing. Aris murmured, his gaze fixed on the enemy flagship, the Iron Resolve. They've made this a test of will, a public spectacle. They forgot that will has a fulcrum. A young ensign, her face pale under the tactical lighting, looked up from her station. Sir, the convoy is broadcasting distress signals. The colony on Xylos, they're running out of medical supplies. The transports are full of refugees and essentials. They won't survive a prolonged siege, let alone an attack. Eris nodded, the weight of those lives settling on his shoulders. He felt the subtle thrum of the Vanguard's graviton drive through the deck plates, a constant reminder of the power at his command and the responsibility that came with it. The hegemony counts ships and guns, Lyra. Run the initial decoy projection. Let's see if they're watching as closely as they pretend to be. Executing, Lyra confirmed. Projecting ghost signatures now. We are shaping the field to simulate a flanking maneuver. On the holotank, a cluster of faint blue icons detached from the human fleet, ghosting toward the hegemony's port side. It was a classic feint, a textbook move. The Valbarans wouldn't fall for it, but their reaction would tell Aris everything he needed to know about their command discipline. He watched his knuckles resting on the cool metal of the command rail. The enemy fleet did not stir. A ledger only balances if both sides are counted. Commander Rostova frowned. No response, Admiral. Not even a sensor ping. They're either supremely confident or supremely arrogant. Their doctrine demands it. Aris replied. To react is to acknowledge our move has merit. To ignore it is to display dominance. He saw the trap. They wanted him to commit to a foolish attack to break his fleet against their shields so they could claim a righteous victory. A small vignette played on a secondary screen, a live feed from the lead transport, the Stellaron. A medic was trying to calm a child. Her own face etched with worry. She was holding a small, worn datapad, its screen cracked, showing a cartoon animal. The child cried silently, clutching a ragged blanket. The medic's soft words were inaudible, but her compassion was a beacon in the cold void. Aris felt the image sharpen his resolve. This was not about warships. It was about them. We are the shield for those who cannot hold one, Lyra Aris said, turning away from the civilian feed. They expect a military response. They've prepared for a fleet-on-fleet engagement. What they haven't prepared for is a lesson in physics. He tapped the holotank, zooming in on the space between the two fleets. Begin Phase 1 of the lattice. Slave all drone emitters to your primary matrix. I want every decoy, every sensor ghost, every microprobe we have out there. Calculus suggests a high risk of resource expenditure for an uncertain outcome. Admiral Lyra noted her tone perfectly neutral. It was her duty to present the odds stripped of emotion. The outcome isn't uncertain, Aris countered, his voice firm. The outcome is that we teach them something about ultimatums. Their doctrine is a hammer. They think everything is a nail. The Vanguard and its sister ships began to hum with a new intensity. From a dozen launch bays, thousands of tiny drones no larger than a fist streamed into the void. They were not weapons. They were mirrors, each one a sophisticated piece of technology designed to catch and redirect energy. They spread out, forming a vast, intricate pattern in the seemingly empty space, a glittering web of impossibly thin filaments and polished surfaces. To the naked eye, it was nothing. To a sensor array, it was chaos. The mirror lattices deploying Admiral Rostova reported, her eyes wide with the sheer scale of the operation unfolding on her console. "We're creating a sensor nightmare for them. That's the point," Eva Aris said. The deck vibrated slightly as the ship diverted power to the emitter arrays, controlling the drone swarm. The hegemony's doctrine relies on perfect information, on a clear picture of the battlefield. We're going to deny them that. We're going to give them 1,000 false targets for every real one. You cannot threaten what you cannot target. The countdown clock ticked past the 3-hour mark. The Valberan fleet remained motionless, a monument to their own unyielding dogma. They were waiting for the humans to break, to charge, to give them the battle they craved. But Aris was not playing their game. He was changing the rules of the board itself. He saw a flicker of movement on the holotank. A single Valberan scout ship detached from the main formation, moving cautiously toward the growing drone field. "They're taking the bait," Rostova said, a hint of excitement in her voice. "Lyra, give them something to see," Aris ordered. "Focus a dozen drones to create a phantom signature. Make it look like a heavy cruiser that's trying to hide. Projecting now." Admiral Lyra confirmed. The scout ship accelerated, its engines flaring as it moved to intercept the ghost vessel. It fired a single ranging shot, a lance of pure energy that sliced through the void. But instead of hitting a ship, the beam struck the mirror lattice. The drones, linked by Lyra's impossibly fast calculations, absorbed and redirected the energy. The single beam was fractured into 1,000 smaller harmless beams, scattering in every direction. The scout ship was suddenly bathed in its own reflected light. A mirror shows you only what you are. On the Vanguard's bridge, the crew watched in stunned silence. The Valberan scout, momentarily blinded and overwhelmed by its own reflected energy, veered off course. Its sensors would be screaming with ghost signals and phantom energy readings. It was a masterful display of electronic warfare, a bloodless counter that turned the enemy's own strength against them. "Their scout is retreating, sir," the tactical officer called out. "It's dumping its sensor logs to their flagship." Aris allowed himself a small, grim smile. "Good. Let them see it. Let them analyze it. Let them wonder what else is hiding in the dark." The first seed of doubt had been planted. The hegemony's perfect picture of the battle was now shattered. They built a wall. We gave them a hall of mirrors. The countdown timer now read 02:30:00. The Valberan flagship Iron Resolve finally broke its silence. It wasn't a hail, but a fleet-wide broadcast, a furious burst of encrypted data. "They're recalibrating their sensors," Lyra reported, "attempting to filter out our ghost signals. It is a complex problem. It will take them time." "Time we don't have," Rostova countered, gesturing to the timer. "We have exactly as much time as we need," Aris said calmly. His eyes never left the enemy fleet. "The first move was a lesson. The second is a choice." He gestured to the holotank. "Lyra, prepare the convoy. We're not breaking the blockade. We're walking right through it." A stated truth is not the whole truth. The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances. Walking through a battle fleet was suicide. But Aris's expression was unreadable, a mask of calm authority. "The mirror lattice was phase 1. He explained, his voice filling the quiet bridge. "It was designed to create confusion. Phase 2 is designed to create an opportunity. He magnified a section of the Valbaran formation. Their ships are positioned for maximum overlapping fire, a standard blockade pattern. But their doctrine makes them predictable. They will not break formation until they have a confirmed priority target. The air on the bridge seemed to thrum with anticipation. A low hum from the environmental controls was the only sound for a moment. So we give them one, Rostova finished, understanding dawning in her eyes. Exactly, Eris confirmed. Lyra, reconfigure the lattice. I want one single massive energy signature. Make it look like the Vanguard is making a full power run right at their center. You cannot ignore a dagger pointed at your heart. Calculations confirm this will draw their fire, Lyra stated. The probability of the Vanguard sustaining damage is significant. The Vanguard won't be there, Eris replied. Only its ghost will be. He turned to his helmsman. Lieutenant, prepare for a low-power drift, silent running. We're going to use the sensor chaos to mask our real movement. The deception was audacious. They would use the mirror lattice to create a perfect high-energy copy of the flagship, sending it on a suicide run. The Valbarans, obsessed with their doctrine of overwhelming force, would have no choice but to respond to the most immediate threat. While they were busy firing at a phantom, the real human fleet would be slipping through a gap in their lines. Their greatest strength is their greatest weakness. The countdown reached 01:45. On the main screen, the ghost image of the Vanguard flared to life. It was a masterpiece of electronic illusion, a perfect copy of the ship's energy signature, right down to the faint fluctuations of its shield harmonics. It surged forward, a blade of light, aimed at the heart of the hegemony fleet. Phantom is away, Rostova announced, her voice tight. The Valbarans are reacting. Multiple ships are turning to intercept. Hold your course, Lieutenant. Aris ordered his own ship, now drifting silently in the opposite direction, masked by the glittering chaos of the drone swarm. The heat in the bridge rose a few degrees as non-essential systems were powered down to minimize their signature. The only light came from the glowing consoles. The Valbaran fleet, which had been so rigid and unmoving, was now a flurry of motion. Their ships repositioned, breaking their perfect blockade to form a kill box around the Phantom Vanguard. It was exactly what Eris had predicted. Their doctrine demanded they meet the head-on charge with overwhelming force. A doctrine without flexibility is a cage. On the main viewer, the first lances of Valbaran energy fire reached the Phantom. The image flared, shimmered, and held for a precious few seconds as Lyra's drones worked frantically to maintain the illusion. Then, as dozens of beams converged on the same point in space, the Phantom shattered into a cloud of dissipating light. There was a moment of stunned silence on the Vanguard's bridge. They had fired on nothing. They had wasted a massive amount of energy, and more importantly, they had broken their blockade. The gap is open, Admiral, Rostova said, a grin spreading across her face. It's wider than we calculated. Signal the convoy, Eris ordered. Full burn. Get them through, now. Their wall is now a gate. A stream of alerts cascaded across the tactical display. The Valbaran fleet, realizing their mistake, was scrambling to reform their lines. But it was too late. The civilian transports, their engines flaring to life, surged forward, heading for the gap Eris had created. The human warships moved to escort them, their own engines now at full power. The cost of the maneuver was not zero. The Vanguard shuddered as a stray energy blast, a parting shot from a frustrated Valbaran cruiser, impacted the port shielding. Sparks showered from a ceiling conduit, and the lights flickered for a moment. The air filled with the acrid smell of burnt wiring. Damage report! Aris snapped his hands, gripping the command rail. Minor shield ablation, sir. An officer reported from a damage control station. Power fluctuations contained. We're still fully operational. It was a small price to pay. A debt paid in sparks is better than one paid in blood. The convoy was almost clear. The Valbaran fleet was in disarray, their perfect formation shattered by their own predictable reaction. They had been so focused on the threat they expected that they had been blind to the real danger. Then a new transmission came through. It wasn't the looped ultimatum. It was a direct encrypted channel from the Iron Resolve to the Vanguard. On the main screen, the face of the Valberan commander appeared. He was a stern, hard-faced man, his uniform immaculate, his eyes burning with cold fury. "Admiral Thorne," he began, his voice a low growl of controlled rage, "you have made a grave error. This trickery will not be forgotten. You have violated the sanctity of an ultimatum." Iris met his gaze without flinching. "I violated nothing, Commander. I simply refuse to accept your terms. Your ultimatum was a threat to innocent lives. My only duty is to protect them." "We do not answer threats, we answer duty." "You believe you have won?" the Valberan commander sneered. "You have merely delayed the inevitable. The hegemony's resolve is absolute. We will not be made fools of." Aris leaned forward slightly. "You were not made a fool of, Commander. You were shown a reflection. You saw your own doctrine's inflexibility and mistook it for a ship." He gestured to the holotank, where the last of the civilian transports was now safely past the former blockade line. "The choice was always yours. You could have chosen to talk. You chose to threaten. This is the consequence." The Valberan commander's face hardened into a mask of pure hatred. "This is not over, Thorne. We will hunt you down. We will see your fleet burn." The transmission cut out. A threat is the argument of a failed position. Rostova let out a long breath. "He's not going to let this go, Aris." "I know," the Admiral replied, his gaze distant. "He can't. His entire belief system is built on the idea that might makes right." He turned to Lyra. "What's the status of the lattice?" 72% of the drones are still operational, Admiral," the AI reported. "We can reform it for a defensive screen if needed." "No," Aris said. "Not defensive. Not anymore." He looked at the Valberan fleet, now beginning to regroup, their anger a palpable force across the void. "They came here to make a point. They believe they hold the ledger." The steady, low-frequency hum of the ship's life support system filled the momentary silence on the bridge. "This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. Lyra." Aris continued, his voice taking on a new, harder edge. "They wanted a confrontation. They wanted to demonstrate their power. Let's give them exactly what they want. But on our terms." He tapped the holotank, bringing up a schematic of the entire star system. "The convoy is safe. Now we settle the account. Their move is made. Now we set the board." Sir Rostova asked a question in her eyes. "The hegemony doctrine has a critical flaw," Eva Aris explained. "It assumes a binary outcome. Either the enemy capitulates or they are destroyed. It leaves no room for a third option." He traced a line on the schematic, a wide arc that swung around the system's primary gas giant. "They think this is a chase. They think we're running. We are not," Lyra stated, her voice devoid of inflection, but carrying an undeniable weight. "Our fuel and energy reserves are at 89%. The Valberan fleet expended 17% of their available energy firing on the Phantom. Their efficiency is dropping." The numbers told the story. The Valberans had punched at a shadow, and it had cost them. Now they were angry, and angry commanders made mistakes. Aris was counting on it. He felt the ship's deck plates beneath his feet, a solid anchor in the vast emptiness of space. "Brace for the reckoning." "They will pursue us," Rostova said, tracing the enemy's likely path on the holotank. "They'll try to cut us off before we can reach the jump gate at the system's edge." "Let them," Aris said. "Lyra, I want the remaining drones from the lattice to fall back and form a wide sensor net behind us. I want to know every move they make, every ship they reposition." He looked at the tactical display, his mind already 3 steps ahead. The initial confrontation had been a test of deception. This next phase would be a test of strategy. He saw the path forward not as a retreat, but as a carefully orchestrated maneuver designed to turn the entire system into a trap. The hegemony believed they were the hunters pursuing a fleeing prey. They were about to discover they were the ones being led into a cage. A cage does not need bars when it is made of pride. Before the next set of commands could be issued, Aris paused, his gaze drifting to a small private monitor. It showed a filtered feed from the newly liberated convoy. In the mess hall of the Stellaron, the same medic he had seen earlier was now handing out ration packs. The child was no longer crying, but was looking at the medic with wide, trusting eyes. The scene was mundane quiet and profoundly important. It was the why behind every tactical decision, every calculated risk. The quiet hum of voices was a stark contrast to the sterile silence of the bridge. Lyra broadcast a message to the convoy, Aris said softly. Tell them to maintain course for the jump gate. We will hold the line. Message sent. Admiral, the AI confirmed. He turned back to the main holotank, his expression hardening. The civilian vignette was over. The time for compassion was in the planning. The time for execution was now. The Valbaran fleet, now fully regrouped, was accelerating, their engine signatures burning hot with fury. Hold the line. Eva, bring the fleet to combat alert Alpha, Aris commanded. All ships prepare for a full system engagement. Lyra began calculating the firing solutions for the corridor. I want it ready the moment they cross the threshold. Rostova's eyes widened slightly. The corridor was not an attack plan. It was a kill box, a carefully prepared trap that used the system's own geography, asteroid fields, gravitational tides, nebula clouds to channel an enemy fleet into a vulnerable position. It was a high-risk, high-reward strategy that they had only ever run in simulations. Admiral, the corridor gambit requires perfect timing, she cautioned. If we move too early, they'll see the trap. Too late, and we'll be caught in our own crossfire. The Valbarans are angry, not stupid, Aris countered. They will be looking for a conventional trap, so we will not present one. His finger traced the projected path of the enemy fleet. We will open a door for them. We will make it look like a clear, unobstructed path to victory. A true trap is the one you walk into willingly. The human fleet began to move its course, precise and deliberate. They weren't running in a straight line for the jump gate. They were tracing the edge of a dense asteroid field, a place no sane commander would take his fleet. It looked like a desperate move, an attempt to use the asteroids for cover. They're changing course to intercept, the tactical officer reported. They're moving to cut us off at the far side of the asteroid field. As predicted, Lyra stated. Their projected route will take them directly through the optimal entry point for the corridor. Aris watched the icons on the holotank converge. The Valbarans were taking the bait perfectly. They saw a fleeing enemy making a foolish mistake. Their pride and their doctrine wouldn't let them see the truth. The glare from the tactical plot reflected in his eyes 2 cold points of light. They think they are forging our chains. All ships, Aris broadcast, his voice calm and steady across the fleet's command channel. On my mark, execute a full power burn. We're going to accelerate directly toward them. A murmur of surprise went through the bridge. It was a move that defied all tactical sense. Charging back at a superior force was suicide. Admiral Rostova questioned, her brow furrowed in confusion. The corridor isn't just a location, Eva. It's a moment in time, Aris explained. We are not the bait. The open space on the other side of this asteroid field is the bait. We are the trigger. He felt the familiar vibration of the engines spooling up, a promise of immense power about to be unleashed. The ship felt alive beneath him, a coiled serpent ready to strike. Let them believe the future is written. The human fleet, which had been skirting the edge of the asteroid field, suddenly pivoted. With a flare of engines that must have lit up every sensor on the Valbaran ships, they surged forward, back toward their pursuers. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, the Valbaran commander would be seeing exactly what Aris wanted him to see. A cornered animal panicked and irrational, making a final desperate charge. His doctrine would tell him to meet it head-on, to crush it with overwhelming force. The two fleets rushed toward each other, the distance closing with terrifying speed. The space between them was no longer empty. It was the designated kill box. Lyra Aris said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Open the ledger." "Ready, Admiral." The moment the Valbaran fleet crossed the invisible threshold, the trap was sprung. It wasn't a sudden barrage of missiles or a volley of energy blasts. It was something far more subtle and far more devastating. We will show them the true meaning of an accounting. From the dense asteroid field, the human fleet had just passed thousands of objects suddenly activated. They were not asteroids. They were the dormant drones of the mirror lattice, augmented by hundreds of larger pre-positioned weapon platforms that had been laid like mines weeks ago during a routine survey of the system. This was never a chase. It was an ambush. The entire asteroid field lit up. Beams of energy, guided by Lyra's flawless calculations, did not target the Valbaran ships directly. Instead, they lanced out into the empty space of the corridor, striking the repositioned mirror drones. The beams were caught, focused, and redirected, creating a cage of pure energy around the Valbaran fleet. It was the mirror lattice reforged from a tool of deception into a weapon of war. The Valbarans had charged into a box, and the walls were now on fire. Their pride built the box. We merely closed the lid. The Valbaran ships were instantly caught in a crossfire from 1,000 different angles at once. Energy beams originating from the asteroid field were bounced off the mirror drones, striking their ships from above, below, and from the sides. Their shields, designed to repel attacks from a single direction, were overwhelmed by the multi-vector assault. On the Vanguard's bridge, the holotank was a storm of light and data. Alarms blared on the Valbaran ships, their panicked communications flooding the spectrum. They were completely surrounded, trapped in a web of their own making. "Their lead ships are taking heavy damage," Rostova reported, her voice a mixture of awe and grim satisfaction. "Shields are failing across their formation." Eris watched, his expression unreadable. This was the moment of truth. He had turned their strength, their aggressive head-on doctrine, into a fatal weakness. He had used their own predictability to lead them into a trap from which there was no easy escape. "This is the cost of your ultimatum." The human fleet, having served as the trigger, was now safely past the kill box. They pivoted their own weapons, now trained on the trapped and bewildered enemy. They had not fired a single direct shot yet, but they had already broken the back of the hegemony fleet. "Commander of the Iron Resolve," Aris broadcast, his voice cutting through the chaos of the Valbaran comms channels. "This is Admiral Thorne. You have a choice. Power down your weapons and surrender, or we will close this account permanently." There was no immediate response, only the continued spectacle of the Valbaran fleet being carved apart by its own reflected energy and the hidden weapon platforms. Their formation was shattered. Several ships were already adrift, their engines dead. The Iron Resolve itself had a deep glowing scar across its bow. "You demanded an answer. This is it." Then a defiant single energy beam shot out from the Iron Resolve, aimed directly at the Vanguard. It was an act of pure, spiteful rage. "Incoming!" the tactical officer yelled, but Aris was ready. Lyra, final reflection. A handful of mirror drones held in reserve zipped into the path of the beam. They caught the blast, spun, and with micron-perfect precision redirected it. But not at the Iron Resolve. The beam was sent careening into the system's gas giant, where it was swallowed harmlessly by the swirling atmosphere. It was a final, emphatic statement. "We are not you." A new message appeared on the screen. It was from the Valbaran second-in-command. It contained a single word: yielding. The Iron Resolve's commander had been overruled. His final act of defiance had cost him his authority. The energy beams from the asteroid field ceased. The mirror lattice powered down its drones, going inert. Silence fell over the battlefield, a silence broken only by the crackle of static from damaged Valberan ships. Aris watched the enemy fleet, their lights flickering, their power failing. He had won a total victory, not by destroying them, but by forcing them to confront the bankruptcy of their own philosophy. He had held up a mirror, and they had shattered themselves against it. The ledger is balanced. The bridge of the Vanguard was quiet. The crew, who had been tense and focused just moments before, now allowed themselves to breathe. They had faced down an ultimatum and emerged not only victorious in a way that affirmed their own values. They had not just won a battle. They had made a statement that would echo through the galaxy. Lyra. Aris said, his voice soft but clear in the sudden calm. Send a message to Hegemony High Command. Use their own emergency frequencies. Tell them their fleet in the Cygnus Gap has been neutralized. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Tell them we are holding their ships and their crews as collateral against any future ultimatums. A full accounting will be sent. We expect them to learn from it. He looked at the crimson ultimatum timer, which had been forgotten in the heat of battle. It still had 17 minutes remaining. He had not only beaten the deadline, he had rendered it meaningless. The scent of ozone had faded, replaced by the clean, sterile air of a bridge that had done its duty. Their clock has run out. Ours is just beginning, Eva Aris said, turning to his executive officer. Prepare a rescue and salvage operation. We'll offer medical aid to their wounded. Show them how a civilized fleet behaves. Rostova nodded, a look of profound respect on her face. She moved to carry out his orders, her steps sure and confident. Aris turned back to the holotank, to the image of the defeated fleet. The trap had been sprung, the battle won. But he knew this was only the beginning. The hegemony was a vast, powerful entity. They would not take this lesson gracefully. This victory was just the opening move in a much larger game. The strategic flip had been executed, the cost of their doctrine exposed for all to see. But the real test would be what came next. He watched as the first of his fleet's medical shuttles, bright white against the black, moved toward the crippled Valberan ships. It was an image of mercy, a stark contrast to the ultimatum that had started it all. He had forced them to face a reckoning, but the final entry in the ledger was yet to be written. We teach first. We fight if forced. We remember always. The rescue operation was a silent, methodical affair. Human shuttles, stark white against the void, docked with the crippled Valberan warships, their hulls scorched and pocked by the redirected energy blasts. On the bridge of the Vanguard, Aris Thorn watched the operation unfold on the main holotank. The icons of his medical teams were small green pulses of life moving through the dead gray shells of the enemy fleet. The air scrubbers worked quietly, but the faint metallic scent of discharged energy still lingered. First reports are coming in from the Iron Resolve, Commander Rostova said, her voice low. Their casualties are surprisingly light, mostly burns and system shock. Their wounded are being triaged and transferred to our medical bay. She paused. Their crew, they're confused. They were prepared for a battle, not this. Their doctrine prepared them for violence, not assistance, Aris murmured, his eyes fixed on the hulk of the enemy flagship. They don't know how to process mercy from an enemy. A defeat is a lesson, not a sentence. Lyra's voice chimed in, calm and analytical. Admiral, I am intercepting encrypted high-frequency transmissions from the Valberan home system. A new fleet has been dispatched. Their estimated time of arrival is 18 hours. Analysis of their engine signatures indicates this is a rapid response force. They are coming, and they are coming fast. The calm on the bridge evaporated. Every head turned toward the holotank as Lyra projected the new threat, a tight formation of red icons moving with aggressive speed from the edge of the system. Composition, Aris asked, his voice sharp. Signatures match the Hegemony's Retribution-class destroyers supported by a Dominance-class dreadnought. The unflinching gaze, Lyra reported. This is not a relief force, Admiral. It is an execution fleet. They did not learn. They only escalated. Rostova's expression was grim. The Retribution class is designed for fleet killing. Fast, heavy shields, and they carry lattice-breaker torpedoes designed specifically to destroy drone swarms and electronic warfare systems. They've learned from our first move, Aris acknowledged. He felt the familiar thrum of the ship beneath his feet, a steady heartbeat against the rising tension. They know about the mirror lattice. They're coming with the specific counter for our last strategy. Then we must devise a new one, he stated simply. His gaze swept over his crew, their faces tense but resolute. They expect us to run or to use the same trick again. We will do neither. A new question requires a new answer. He turned his attention to the captured fleet. They were a liability, a collection of broken ships and thousands of prisoners that they could neither abandon nor effectively guard against a new, superior force. Yet they were also an asset, though not in the way a traditional commander might think. Lyra, what is the operational status of the captured ship's primary reactors? Aris asked, a new idea beginning to form. Most are offline, but their core containment fields are stable, the AI replied. With external power, they could be brought to a low-power standby. To what end, Admiral? The Hegemony sent an ultimatum. Then they sent a fleet to punish us for defying it. Aris said, his voice cold and clear. Now they send a bigger fleet. They believe they can control the narrative, that this is a story about their power and our defiance. He tapped the icon of the crippled iron resolve. We are about to change the story. The narrative is a weapon, too. Hours passed. The human fleet worked with quiet, desperate efficiency. Rescue operations were completed, and the Valberan crews were secured in makeshift brigs aboard the human ships. They were treated with professionalism, given food, water, and medical care. This itself was a form of psychological warfare, a quiet dismantling of the brutal zero-sum worldview their doctrine had instilled in them. On board the Vanguard, a young Valberan engineering ensign named Kalin sat in a clean white medical bay. A human doctor had just finished dressing the burn on his arm. He had expected a laser blast to the head or the cold of a vacuum cell. Instead, he'd been given a painkiller and a nutrient pack. He watched the human crew moving around him, their voices calm, their actions efficient. They weren't conquerors. They were professionals. The dissonance was a physical ache in his mind. He saw Admiral Thorne on a nearby monitor, the human commander's face calm and focused as he issued orders. There was no gloating, no triumphalism. Kalin had been taught his whole life that humans were chaotic, sentimental, and weak. But the man on the screen looked like the very definition of control. He was seeing a truth his own culture had denied. Truth has a weight that doctrine cannot lift. The new Valberan fleet entered the system a wave of righteous fury and overwhelming power. Their commander, Fleet Marshal Kira Vosh, was legendary. She was a pragmatist, a student of unorthodox warfare, and she despised the rigid doctrine of the commander she was sent to avenge. Her orders were simple: destroy the human fleet, reclaim the captured ships, and erase the dishonor. Fleet Marshal Vosh is broadcasting on an open channel, Rostova announced. On the main screen, the face of a sharp-featured, gray-haired woman appeared. Her eyes were like chips of ice. Admiral Thorne, she said, her voice devoid of the theatrical anger of her predecessor. You have taken Hegemony property and personnel. Return them now, and I will grant your crews a swift end. Resist, and I will space every last one of you. It was another ultimatum, but delivered with the cold precision of a scalpel, not the blunt force of a hammer. They sharpened the blade, but it is still the same threat. Aris met her gaze. Fleet Marshal Vosh, Your ships and crews are being treated in accordance with intersystem law. They are not hostages. They are evidence of a failed policy. I am not here to debate policy, Admiral, Vosh countered. I am here to issue a final command. You have 1 hour to surrender. Aris smiled a thin, humorless expression. Another countdown. Your hegemony is obsessed with them. He leaned forward. Let me offer a counter-proposal. Withdraw your fleet past the Cygnus threshold. Acknowledge the illegality of your first ultimatum. Then we can discuss the repatriation of your personnel. Vosh's eyes narrowed. You are in no position to make demands. I am in a position to demonstrate a principle, Aris replied calmly. The air on the bridge was thick with tension, the low hum of the life support system a counterpoint to the racing hearts of the crew. The choice is yours, Fleet Marshal. The transmission ended. A principle is an anchor in a storm. Lyra, what is her fleet doing? Aris asked the moment the channel closed. They are not charging, Admiral, the AI reported. They are deploying into a wide search and destroy pattern. They are launching their lattice breaker torpedoes in probing waves designed to sweep the area for drone swarms. She's methodical, Rostova observed, a note of respect in her voice. She's not falling for the same trick twice. I never intended her to, Aris said. He turned to the holotank where a new plan was already taking shape. The first lesson was about mirrors. This one is about heat. He gestured toward the system's massive, swirling gas giant, a behemoth of hydrogen and helium named Kronos. The ledger we are about to open is not one of ships or weapons, but of joules and kelvins. The universe keeps its own accounts. Lyra, execute Operation Thermocline, Aris commanded. Slave the engineering crews from the captured Valberan fleet to our power grid. We're not powering up their weapons. We're turning their reactors into radiators. A flurry of activity erupted across the human fleet. Power conduits were attached to the crippled Valberan ships. Under the remote guidance of human engineers, the reactors of the captured fleet were carefully brought online. They generated no power for propulsion or shields. Instead, all their energy output was converted directly into heat, which was then vented silently into space. It was a slow, subtle process. On the Valberan sensor screens, it would appear as nothing more than faint, ghost-like thermal blooms easily dismissed as background radiation, or sensor noise especially, while they were busy hunting for mirror drones that weren't there. A ghost of heat is harder to catch than a ghost of light. They are creating a thermal fog, Lyra explained to the bridge crew, subtly raising the ambient temperature of the entire battle space. It is inefficient, but the effect is cumulative. What's the endgame? Aris, Rostova asked, watching the complex energy transfers on her console. The deck plates had started to vibrate, with a deeper, more resonant hum, as the Vanguard's own reactor worked to manage the massive power shunt. Vosh is hunting for our drones. Her fleet is running active sensor sweeps, firing torpedoes, consuming vast amounts of energy, Aris explained. All of that generates heat. In the cold of space, that heat dissipates quickly. But we are not in the cold of space anymore. We are slowly and visibly turning this entire region into an oven. They are searching for a needle in a haystack we are setting on fire. For the next hour, the human fleet did nothing but wait, hiding in the shadow of a large moon, while the captured ships continued to pump waste heat into the void. Fleet Marshal Vosh's fleet continued its meticulous sweep, finding nothing. Her ships were burning fuel, their heat sinks working overtime to vent the energy from their sensor pulses and torpedo launches. But the heat wasn't dissipating as quickly as it should have. The background temperature of space was rising by fractions of a degree every minute. Her fleet is beginning to show signs of thermal stress, Lyra reported, her voice as calm as ever. Coolant systems on her destroyers are running at 110%. They are building up a heat debt they cannot easily repay. She'll notice soon, Rostova warned. She already has, Aris countered. But she can't explain it. It defies her understanding of the battlefield. He watched the red icons of Vosh's fleet. They had stopped their advance. They were holding position, trying to understand the anomalous sensor readings. You cannot fight an enemy you cannot define. It's time, Iris said. Lyra, bring our fleet to full power, but do not move. The human ships came to life. Their reactors roared, shields glowed, and weapon ports opened. The sudden surge of energy was a massive flare on the Valbaran sensors, a clear and unambiguous signal. But instead of charging or retreating, the human fleet remained perfectly still, an island of pure energy in the warming sea of the battle space. Admiral Vosh is hailing us again, the comms officer reported. Put her on screen. The fleet marshal's face was a mask of cold fury. Another trick, Thorn. What is this? This is a choice, Fleet Marshal, Iris said, his voice level. Your ships are already overheating. My fleet is at full combat readiness, our systems cold and stable. If you advance, you will have to push your reactors into the red line just to engage us. You will be fighting us and the laws of thermodynamics at the same time. He gave her the gun and dared her to check the ammunition. You have boxed me in with heat, she said, a flicker of grudging admiration in her eyes. You've turned the entire system into a weapon. I have merely revealed the conditions that were already here, Iris corrected. Space is not empty. It is full of costs and consequences. Your doctrine of relentless aggression that has a high energy cost. Today, the bill has come due. On the tactical display, Lyra highlighted the heat signatures of Vosh's fleet. They were glowing like angry embers, their efficiency dropping with every passing second. The human fleet, in contrast, was a collection of cool blue icons, their energy reserves untapped. The ledger of heat always balances. Vosh was silent for a long moment. She was a pragmatist, and the numbers on her screen would be telling her an undeniable truth. To fight now would be to risk the catastrophic failure of her entire fleet. Her ships might win the battle, but they would cook themselves in the process. You fight like a coward, Thorn, she finally spat, though the insult lacked conviction. You refuse to meet force with force. I refuse to believe that force is the only answer, Iris replied. I offered you a negotiation. You offered me a threat. My fleet is ready. Your move, Fleet Marshal. He felt the quiet thrum of his own ship's readiness, the potential energy coiled in its systems. Steady as the hand that holds the stronger truth, the standoff stretched for what felt like an eternity. The bridge of the Vanguard was silent, every crew member holding their breath. This was the fulcrum point, the moment where the entire conflict could pivot from a strategic confrontation to a bloody all-out war. The choice rested with one woman trapped between her orders and the undeniable reality of her situation. Then, with a visible effort, Vosh gave a curt nod. Power down your weapon systems, Thorn. I will consider your terms. It was not a surrender, but it was a concession. It was an admission that his strategy had worked, that she could not win on her terms. The cost was too high. A reckoning deferred is a reckoning acknowledged. The Vanguard sustained damage during the delicate operation of disarming Vosh's fleet. A single damaged Valbaran destroyer, its systems failing under the thermal load, suffered a catastrophic coolant leak. The resulting explosion sent a wave of shrapnel across space, and one large piece struck the Vanguard's aft sensor array. The hit was jarring, a violent shudder that threw several crew members from their feet. Damage report, Rostova yelled, pulling herself up. Aft sensors are gone. The tactical officer called out, his console flickering. We've lost 30% of our rear sensor capability. Minor hull breaches on Deck 12, but they're being sealed. It was a tangible cost, a reminder that even a bloodless victory was not without its price. Open the books, but know there will be a price. With Vosh's fleet neutralized by the laws of physics and her own pragmatism, the negotiations began. They were tense, conducted over encrypted channels, a battle of words and wills that was just as critical as the battles of light and heat that had preceded it. Vosh was a sharp, intelligent adversary, but she was negotiating from a position of weakness. Thorn had 2 of her fleets. He held all the cards. He did not demand territory or reparations. He demanded only one thing: that the hegemony officially publicly renounce the ultimatum doctrine. He wanted it struck from their military codex, its use forbidden under their own laws. He wanted a public accounting, a galaxy-wide admission that their philosophy of rule by threat was a failure. "You ask for our humiliation," Vosh stated, her voice tight with restrained anger. "I ask for a precedent," Aris corrected her. "I ask that this cycle of threats and violence be broken. The ledger isn't about ships or territory. It's about ideas. Your idea has been proven bankrupt. It's time to close the account. A tally is not for punishment. It is for truth." Lyra's calculations supported his position. Admiral, the hegemony's political structure cannot withstand the public loss of 2 entire fleets, especially under these circumstances. The economic and political fallout would be catastrophic for their current leadership. Fleet Marshal Vosh's own calculus will force her to recommend compliance. The AI was right. After 3 days of tense negotiation, the hegemony capitulated. The news broke across the galactic nets, a stunning announcement. The Valberan hegemony, a power known for its unyielding arrogance, had publicly rescinded its most foundational military doctrine. The ultimatum doctrine was declared null and void. On the bridge of the Vanguard, Aris watched a public feed. He saw the official notice being posted to the Universal Commercial Ledger, the galaxy's great shared database of laws, treaties, and precedents. The entry was stark and simple, its institutional consequence laid bare for all to see. Doctrine of ultima ratio rescinded by hegemonic decree Cygnus Accords. The cost of their arrogance had been a public humiliation that would reshape their politics for a generation. The balance is struck not in fire but in ink. The final stage was the repatriation. Both Valberan fleets, their systems repaired by human engineers, were returned to the hegemony. Their crews were sent home not as defeated enemies, but as witnesses. They had seen the human fleet's tactics, their discipline, and most importantly, their mercy. They were now carriers of a new idea, an infection of doubt out in their own rigid system. As the last of the hegemony ships prepared to depart, Fleet Marshal Vosh opened a final private channel to the Vanguard. "Thorn," she said, her expression unreadable, "you have won. But know this, an idea once planted can be a dangerous thing for both of us." "The most dangerous ideas, Fleet Marshal," Aris replied, "are the ones that go unchallenged." The connection ended. He watched as the 2 fleets, once his adversaries, turned and began their long, quiet journey home. The space around him was finally empty, the silence profound. The lights on the public ledger confirming the hegemony's decree seemed to burn brighter than any star in the void. The tension on the bridge finally bled away, replaced by a quiet, weary satisfaction. The low hum of the ship's systems felt like a steady, restful breath. The faint scent of recycled air was clear of the ghosts of ozone and heat. His suit's internal monitors registered his heartbeat slowing to a resting pace. The glare from the now quiet consoles softened. The mirror arrays of the drone fleet, now recovered and stowed, had cooled to a dull, unassuming pewter. Thorn looked out at the starfield, at the infinite black dotted with points of light. They had faced down an ultimatum not with greater force, but with a better argument. They had held up a mirror to a belligerent power and shown it the true cost of its philosophy. They had not sought conquest, but correction. It was a new kind of victory, one measured not in ships destroyed, but in a dangerous idea defeated a better precedent set. And in the quiet of the command deck, he understood the weight of what they had done, the new balance they had struck in the eternal calculus of the stars. They sent an ultimatum to teach us fear. We sent a mirror to teach them wisdom.